Hi, it's Katrina. From a meteorite with fossilized aliens in it to a golden cape worn by a fairy queen, here are some amazing artifacts that defy explanation. But I'm going to try to explain as much as I can, since this is Origins Explained after all. World maps in Babylonia. Today you are getting 2 ancient Babylonian tablets for the price of 1. First, I want to talk about a very unusual clay tablet currently on display at the British Museum. It is the oldest customer service complaint that historians know of. This ancient tablet might just prove that Karens have been around since the dawn of civilization. The clay tablet was written by a Babylonian copper merchant named Matani. He was so upset that he took out a piece of clay and started chiseling his aggravation down in cuneiform script. This went down in the year 1750 BC. I bet you're dying to know what Matani was so furious about. He was dissatisfied with the quality assurance and service of a company called Anisha Fine Copper. In his customer complaint, Matani said he dispatched his personal assistant to the company to get a refund, but the assistant came back empty-handed, much to Matani's displeasure. The whole message is really long, but let me give you a few translated tidbits. Matani wrote, "What do you take me for that you treat somebody like me with such contempt? On account of that 1 trifling mina of silver which I owe you, you feel free to speak in such a way, while I have given to the palace on your behalf 1,080 pounds of copper." I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. In plain modern English, Matani basically said, "How dare you treat me like this? Don't you know who I am? I have spent so much money at your copper business." Isn't it amazing to see how similar people were almost 4,000 years ago? This ancient complaint letter was discovered in the ruins of Ur. Ur is thought by archaeologists to be the first city that boasted an advanced culture. The second Babylonian tablet was crafted around 700 BC in the ancient city of Sippar, which isn't far from Ur. Both cities, now in ruins, are located in Iraq. This tablet has a map on it, the very first map of the world. The map shows Babylon at the very center of the world. It's sort of like how the church believed the Earth to be at the center of the universe. Even though the Babylonians mastered astronomy and geometry, as is evident by other ancient tablets like this one from the city of Uruk, they still saw their capital as the centerpiece of the globe. Near Babylon is Assyria and Elam. Off to the edge of the map is a circular waterway named Salt Sea. There are 8 regions along with some islands, but these ones aren't named. The issue is that the tablet is broken, with only a small chunk of it surviving. There's the map itself and a bit of cuneiform text describing the different regions. The text names lands nobody has ever heard of, claiming them to be occupied by mythical beasts and great heroes. However, the text isn't complete. Without the complete text, scientists can't know the truth of the map. Experts aren't sure if it was supposed to be a map of the Babylonian mythical world or used as a legitimate map of all the lands they knew. What do you think about these ancient Babylonian tablets? Let me know in the comments below. The artifact nobody can explain. There is no way to explain the artifact you are currently looking at. It's supposedly Egyptian, supposedly very old. Yet despite countless attempts at making sense of this strange relic, scientists remain stumped. Normally, researchers look to the origin of an object to understand it, but this doesn't work for our object of intrigue today because nobody knows where it came from. It reportedly arrived at a museum in Holland in 1828, or it arrived to a museum in Sweden in 1830. Museums and dates differ depending on the source you're looking at. With no trace of an origin to speak of, let's focus on the physical object to look for clues. It's a disc of pure alabaster, slightly larger than a dinner plate, surprisingly thick, and weighing about 150 pounds. It's a sizable chunk of stone covered in mysterious symbols. The symbols don't look like the kinds of hieroglyphs I'm used to seeing when investigating ancient Egypt. How about you? The symbols on the white stone do look like an old type of iconography, but which one? Is this thing even Egyptian? A variety of holes in the artifact suggest it was used for something technical. It could have been for embalming or complex rituals. The jury is still out. At the end of the day, this is one of the most bizarre objects I've ever seen. I really wish someone knew more about it. If that someone is you, be sure to let us all know in the comments. It's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Hike Around and Find Out for the generous super thanks. It really means a lot. If you're new here, subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The teeth of the missing link. Have you ever heard of Paranthropus, the last of the ape people? It's a tale of a lost species that puzzles scientists to no end. It's also a story about an accidental discovery made by a teenager in South Africa in the 1930s. In 1938, British paleontologist Robert Broom learned about a kid who had discovered fragments of a mysterious skull while investigating a cave. The esteemed professor tracked down the young boy, going straight to his school. How embarrassing would that be to have a random professor you'd never met just show up at school asking you about some teeth? Robert was appalled to find the kid on the playground with some of the most valuable teeth in the world jingling in his pants pocket like loose coins. The teeth belonged to a creature the likes of which had never been identified before. It took Robert a few months to analyze the teeth, but he finally came up with his conclusion. They belonged to a hominin that Robert named Paranthropus. He believed the creature to be a misfit, close in relation to ancient ancestors of humans, but a little off the mark. Paranthropus looked physically like an early, small-brained hominin, but it was more of an ape. Robert described the mysterious animal as the forgotten hominin. Others have called it the missing link. Paranthropus lived from roughly 2.9 to 1.2 million years ago. It was surprisingly robust, strong, and well-built. It lived across large sections of East Africa and South Africa, likely alongside ancient members of the Homo species. It had a very heavy skull and jaw muscles powerful enough to shatter a jawbreaker. The creature was also mostly herbivorous, eating things like roots and nuts. And scientists think it could also use tools. This is the weird part. It wasn't a member of the human species. It wasn't a member of the primitive ape species. It was sort of a middle creature that used tools and had a basic level of cognitive function. It was more sophisticated than any living ape, but it wasn't human. While scientists these days don't really like using the term missing link, Paranthropus is still the best fit for the title. Debate continues over just how important Paranthropus was in the grand scheme of human evolution. The Meteorite with Alien fossils. There is life in space, and I have the proof to back it up. In 2013, a very special meteorite made big news across the globe. A British professor of astrobiology claimed that he found biological fossils embedded in a space rock. These fossils are of real aliens from somewhere deep in the solar system. The scientist's name is Chandra Wickramasinghe. He was the director of the Buckingham Centre for Astrobiology at the University of Buckingham in England. In a shocking scientific article, Professor Chandra outlined the impossible discovery he made. It began with a ball of fire in the sky on December 29, 2012. A meteorite burst into flames above Sri Lanka. The hot piece of space debris was picked up by scientists at the Sri Lankan Medical Research Institute in Colombo. They sent 628 small fragments of the meteorite to their fellow scientists at Cardiff University. That was where Chandra and other researchers like Jamie Wallace began their investigation. Electron microscopy revealed the presence of algae fossils inside the small stone fragments. According to Chandra, Jamie, and their colleagues, the fossils confirm an unlikely theory you may have heard before. It's called panspermia, the theory that life arrived on planet Earth from somewhere else in the solar system. The idea is that comets brought tiny organisms to the planet, which were the very first life forms here. The tiny extraterrestrial organisms grew and evolved over billions of years until, voila, human beings. Chandra and Jamie believe the fossils found within the meteorite prove all life on this planet is extraterrestrial in origin. The researchers even said that they identified thin flagella, indicative of evolution in low gravity. The small organisms may have been evolving in space, meaning they can live in the vacuum of nothingness, with no atmosphere. Panspermia is very exciting because it means there could be millions of planets with life on them. It could mean that life isn't that unique and is instead hurtling through space on millions or billions of comets and meteorites. When one of these objects smashes into a planet, the organisms are dispersed and begin the process of evolution. Here's where things get controversial. The scientific team that investigated the meteorite is positive they proved panspermia. but not very many other scientists are convinced. Biologist P.Z. Myers called Chandra and his fellow researchers a small group of crank academics. In so many words, he called them quacks, lunatics obsessed with the idea that life originated in space and rained down on the planet. Other scientists said the samples were contaminated. It feels like nobody else is convinced of the alien fossils. Part of it is a problem with Chandra himself. He's come under fire for some radical ideas. He once said the flu came from outer space, blaming sickness and disease on raining space dust. What are your thoughts on this one? Alien fossils from a galaxy far, far away, or an ordinary meteorite? Let me know in the comments. The Mold Gold Cape. One of the weirdest capes ever was found by a group of workers by accident in 1833. It's a cape made from solid gold that was actually worn by somebody. The discovery of this artifact is one of those accidents that happens once in a lifetime. A group of workers mining stone in Mold, a community in Wales, came across a pile of human bones. The workers had accidentally smashed into an ancient burial mound that had been sealed for the last 4,000 years. The burial mound was hidden underneath a local feature called the Fairy Hill. Locals had been wary of the place for centuries. They believed the hill was home to a race of fairies, so they left it alone. Even if people said they weren't scared, they were secretly scared. The hill was practically haunted, with nobody going near it lest they disturb or anger the supernatural creatures inside. Alas, no superstition can hold back the mining industry. The tunnel was bored into without mercy. It seemed the locals had been right to leave it alone. The Fairy Hill had been hiding someone's burial. Someone was laid to rest inside a stone-lined grave deep within the mound. When the workers broke into the grave, what they found was extremely damaged. The skeleton had been pulverized by age and smashed into bits. The cape was also badly crushed, looking sort of like a crumpled sheet of bronze. When the person was originally laid to rest, they were wearing the cape. It was designed to fit someone very thin, perhaps a lean man or a woman. The gender of the person buried has never been confirmed. The cape itself is a unique artifact without equal. It was made from a solid sheet of gold, fitted with a soft leather liner and decorated with 300 amber beads. Only a single one of those beads survives today, so you have to use your imagination when picturing how flashy the cape was back in the Bronze Age. But who wore it? That's the big question that everyone has been asking for years. Scientists think the cape could have been ritualistically important, perhaps worn by a slender female priestess, or maybe a queen. She, if it was a she, may have been a queen of the ancient Britons, or maybe she was queen of the fairies. Maybe Fairy Hill was hiding a real burial for a real fairy queen. The Treasury of Atreus. The Tomb of Agamemnon, also called the Treasury of Atreus, may or may not belong to a legendary king from the Trojan War. The one thing that's for sure is that the tomb gave up some of the most incredible treasures ever found in ancient Greece. This burial plot is a beehive tomb that was made about 3,300 years ago. It's the biggest beehive tomb of its kind, and one of the last that was built in Greece. The first thing that catches your attention is how big it is. The tomb is absolutely massive, made from layers of gigantic stone blocks interlocking like a puzzle. There is a dome inside that makes it feel as if you've stepped into a cathedral. When the tomb was first built, it boasted the tallest and widest dome in the world. It wasn't until the Romans built the Temple of Mercury centuries later that a bigger dome existed. What I'm trying to tell you is that the tomb is big. So big, it must have been designed for someone of extreme importance, most likely a king. Either that, or this person was the richest man or woman in Mycenae. But who were the Mycenaeans anyway? In the Bronze Age, there were two major civilizations along the Aegean Sea. There were the Minoans of Crete, seafaring warriors who prospered on their isolated fortress in the sea. And then on the mainland were the Mycenaeans. They were the most powerful kingdom in the region, dominating the vast majority of mainland Greece and several nearby islands. They traded with Egypt and the Levant. The Mycenaeans were sort of like the Greeks before Greece, thought of as the indigenous Greeks. They ruled from their capital city of Mycenae. If the legends are true, the Mycenaeans hated the Trojans. They went to war against the city of Troy, with heroes like Achilles and Odysseus becoming immortalized during the conflict. The king who led them across the sea to the gates of Troy was Agamemnon. When the tomb was discovered outside the ancient walls of Mycenae at the start of the 19th century, a lot of scholars thought the final resting place of King Agamemnon was finally found. Archaeologists excavated this place for decades, uncovering an obscene number of relics. Archaeologists discovered bones covered in gold. They found gold and silver objects. Enough antiques were taken from the ruin to fill every shelf in a museum. All the same, not a single treasure found within the tomb ever identified the person buried in it. Nothing. Nada. Not one thing is known about the owner of the tomb. Maybe Agamemnon was buried here, confirming the Trojan War to be a real historical event. But at this point, it's still so mysterious that Hercules could have been buried here for all anyone knows. The Nazi obsession with the Irminsul idol. The Externstein is a very unusual site that most people outside of Germany have never heard of. It has a long and sometimes unbelievable history, starting more than 1,000 years ago. It was here that the Nazis went treasure hunting in World War II. The Externstein is kind of an archaeological site, but mostly it's just a sandstone rock formation inside the Teutoburg forest. The formation consists of a few tall columns of rock that look out of place, rising suddenly from the forest. They stand in a valley with the wooded hills rising in all directions. It's the striking image of the place that's made it so important throughout history. I'll start with the history that's been confirmed and move on to the more mythical side of things. In the 8th century, Christians began making pilgrimages here. The stones became home to a hermitage and a Christian chapel. The rock formations hosted Christian pilgrims throughout the Middle Ages. Its history might go back even earlier. Legend has it the Saxons used the Externstein as a place of pagan worship during the Dark Ages. It was a mystical place to the Saxons, who gathered to hold strange rituals and druid-like ceremonies. Who doesn't like dressing up in robes and chanting around some tall rocks? As captivating as that sounds, archaeologists have never found evidence of pagan activity here. The Externstein is also said to be the place where Charlemagne, king of the Franks, destroyed the legendary Irminsul idol. Now here's where things get serious. The Saxons were a Germanic people who were considered savages by the Romans. Yet for being savages, the Saxons ended up taking over England starting near the end of the 5th century as the Roman Empire crumbled. While the Romans had been busy converting to Christianity, the Saxons remained hardcore pagans. The main symbol of the Saxons' pagan beliefs was the Irminsul idol. It was a sacred object that looked like a tall, magical pillar. There is very little information on it, with all scientists know about the artifact coming from medieval chroniclers. These chroniclers wrote that King Charlemagne destroyed the Irminsul idol between 772 and 783 during the Saxon Wars. These wars engulfed a major portion of Europe. Charlemagne entered Saxony with the intent of conquering it. 18 campaigns were fought, and in the end, the tribal Saxons were destroyed. The proud pagans were violently forced to convert to Christianity. Destroying their idol was like a slap in the face. It could be compared to how the Spanish burned the Aztec temples to the ground to destroy their religion. Charlemagne even had a church built over the ashes of the Irminsul idol. The Spanish did the same thing when they burned down temples in Mexico. I think it's time to tell you about what the Nazis did at the Externstein. In 1933, the stone formations became the focus of Heinrich Himmler's propaganda machine. The Nazis believed the Externstein had been the location of a major Saxon shrine. There was a sun observatory here, along with the Irminsul idol. The site soon became known as the Germanic Stonehenge. The Nazis really pushed the idea that the stones held great significance to their ancestors. It was a point of nationalistic pride. The stones were studied by the Ahnenerbe division of the SS. They were the paranormal division of the SS, hunting for things like Thor's hammer and the Holy Grail. The Ahnenerbe really studied the stones, trying to find a connection to ancient Germanic folklore. In 1934, the Nazis started demolishing all tourist infrastructure in the area. They brought in Serbian prisoners of war from concentration camps to build a sacred grove. The Nazis were trying to bring back the ways of the ancient Saxons. If it had been up to them, every last German would have gone back to being pagan. They likely would have built a new Irminsul idol and erected it at the Externstein. To this day, nobody knows what the Irminsul idol looked like, or if it had any special powers. The Sacred Garima Gospels. One of the most mysterious religious texts is housed inside a secluded Ethiopian monastery that very few people have ever visited. The story surrounding this book is one of the most intriguing in all of Christian mythology. The book is called the Garima Gospels, a single book that contains 3 manuscripts. It isn't the text that's interesting here. The Gospels only contain the 4 canonical Gospels in the Standard Bible. There's a little bit of supplementary material, but nothing crazy like the Book of Enoch. No, the interesting thing is the book itself. Nobody outside Ethiopia even knew it existed until 1950. Beatrice Plain, a British art historian, visited the Abba Garima monastery after World War II. This is not your typical religious sanctuary. It's deep in the dry and desolate wastelands of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, hardly more than a cave carved into a hill. As a woman, Beatrice was not allowed inside the monastery, but the monks did carry out several manuscripts for her to look at. That was the first time that someone from the outside world saw the Garima Gospels. In 2013, it was announced that scientists had received samples from the Garima Gospels for testing. Radiocarbon analysis of the samples showed a date of roughly 390 AD. This dating is insane. Scientists initially thought the book couldn't be more than about 900 years old. It turns out it could be more than 1,400 years old. That makes the Garima Gospels one of the oldest surviving Christian documents on the planet. But where did these Gospels come from? And how did the book manage to stay preserved in one place for so long? Experts think it remained hidden in a cave for hundreds of years. Starting in the 9th century, Muslims moved into the surrounding area. If they had discovered a book like this, they would have destroyed it. Sort of like with the Dead Sea Scrolls, a group of monks likely hid the book in a dark cavern with plans to go back and get it a few centuries later. The Mermaid Bed. Archaeologists recently uncovered an incredible ancient burial in northern Greece. Take a look for yourself. That skeleton in the picture, image courtesy of Areti Chondrogiani Matoki, belongs to a woman who has been dead since the 1st century BC. She was buried in a deep grave on a bronze bed. She wasn't a mermaid, but she might have had an affiliation with mermaids. Each post of the bed is decorated with depictions of happy, fun-loving mermaids. This is one of the coolest beds ever. When archaeologists dug out the bronze bed from the dirt, they found scenes from mythology decorating its frame. There is one image of a bird holding a snake in its mouth, the symbol of the sun god Apollo. But it's the mermaids that really stand out. At the time the woman was buried, she wore a wreath of gold laurel leaves. Archaeologists also found gold threads, suggesting she was wearing a very sophisticated gown when lowered into the ground. She was covered head to toe in flakes of gold. Experts are trying to figure out who this woman was. She must have come from a wealthy background, perhaps from a royal family. There are very few clues to properly identify her. Archaeologists did mention her grave was found near the ruins of Mavropigi. 2,000 years ago, Mavropigi was a major religious city that housed a towering sanctuary to Apollo. Now, Mavropigi is only a small village. Its past long forgotten. Could the mermaid woman have been a priestess at the Temple of Apollo? Or what was the significance of the mermaid decorations on her bed? And for that matter, why was she even buried on a bed? Very few of these artifacts have ever been found before, making the whole situation highly mysterious. I'd love to hear your opinion on the mermaid bed in the comments. The wall in the Baltic Sea. There is a stone wall on the bottom of the Baltic Sea that could be 10,000 years old. Scientists are calling it the oldest megastructure in Europe. I don't know if it's an artifact or a monument, technically speaking, but either way, I just have to tell you about it. Let's start with the discovery. In 2021, a group of scientists were scanning the waters of the Baltic Sea off the coast of Germany. They concentrated their scans on the floor of the Bay of Mecklenburg. They were surprised when they started seeing what appeared to be remnants of a wall almost 2 miles long. This thing is like the Great Wall of China, only not quite as long and underwater and not in China. Let's call it the Great Prehistoric Wall of Europe. The official name given by the scientific team, led by Jacob Gearson, is the Blinker Wall. The wall is about 68 feet beneath the surface. It's definitely a wall, moving in a straight line along the bottom of the bay. Scientists counted about 1,400 small stones making up the barricade, along with 300 significantly larger boulders. Some of the boulders weigh an astonishing 142 tons. You heard that right, 142 tons! The sarsen stones at Stonehenge are only about 25 tons. There is no scenario in which ancient humans moved such heavy blocks without advanced technology. Pulleys, ropes, logs, ramps, absolutely nothing can explain moving a boulder that weighs as much as a blue whale, or as much as about 23 elephants. Jacob Gearson said there is no way the Blinker Wall was created by natural processes. No tsunami did this. Glacial motion can't explain it. The only thing that makes sense, according to Jacob, is that a group of hunter-gatherers built the wall before the bay was underwater. It must have been at least 10,000 years ago, maybe even before that. Not only is this wall older than every other megastructure in Europe, it's also bigger and harder to explain. Its purpose is a mystery. Jacob and his colleagues think it could have been a driving lane for reindeer hunters, used as a way to easily catch dinner. But to be honest, that's only a shot in the dark. Archaeological work in the Bay of Mecklenburg is not nearly finished yet. Researchers have a hunch that there is a second, potentially older wall buried underneath the physical sea floor. To find it, the team will need to somehow dig for it. If this becomes a reality, you'll hear it from me as soon as I get news. Anisha Ketos jewelry. Few people know the name Anisha Keto these days, but you can't really blame them. She hasn't been alive in 2,000 years. In the 1st century AD, Anisha Keto was a Kushite queen of Meroe, the old capital of Nubia. The city of Meroe, its ruins in modern Sudan, hosts some of the greatest pyramids ever built by the Kingdom of Kush. They were the southern neighbors of Egypt, sometimes at war, sometimes allies. There was one time the Nubians even took control of Egypt. Very little is known about Anisha Keto, but that doesn't mean she wasn't important. This queen was so powerful that archaeologists have found monuments in her honor scattered across the old Kushite lands. Her name is written in the Amun Temple of Kawa, and she shows up on a stela in Meroe. And don't let me forget her pyramid. She had her very own epic pyramid that even after 2,000 years of decaying in the desert can take your breath away. It's called the Great Pyramid No. 6. Tragically, it was destroyed by a treasure hunter named Giuseppe Ferlini in the 1830s. Anisha Keto is best known for the jewelry that Giuseppe stole when he smashed her pyramid to pieces in search of burial goods. He found more than 67 rings, tons of bracelets, amulets, and other precious jewels. The artifacts attest to the fact that Queen Anisha Keto was a superstar in her day. I only wish more information about her survived the destruction of Nubia. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something today. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Shimao. Before the ongoing global coronavirus pandemic hit, archaeologists working in China's Loess Plateau in the northernmost part of Shaanxi province uncovered over 6 miles of walls that once belonged to a magnificent fortress city. National Geographic reported that inside is a 230-foot pyramid, as well as painted murals, jade objects, and other beautiful artifacts. The team found 70 stone relief sculptures at the site depicting things like monsters, serpents, and half-human beasts. Perhaps the most disturbing discovery was that of 80 headless human skeletons contained within 6 pits near the city's eastern wall, indicating the possibility of a ritual decapitation that took place while the wall's foundation was laid. This could represent the earliest known evidence of a human sacrifice. The city's original name is unknown, but the ruin site is now called Shimao, and its evidence dates back 4,300 years, roughly 2 millennia before the oldest part of the Great Wall was constructed. Shimao was mysteriously abandoned after peaking between 2,300 and 1,800 BC, roughly 500 years before the earliest Chinese inhabitants arrived hundreds of miles to the south. Its existence is not mentioned in any ancient texts, as far as experts can tell, as large, complex societies from that far north remain conspicuously absent from the historical record. The city, which was bigger than Manhattan's Central Park, is considered China's largest Neolithic settlement. Shimao was extremely well fortified and was situated in the borderlands between warring Central Plains farmers and northern steppe herders, leading researchers to believe that its residents routinely faced danger. Historians are both perplexed and fascinated by the finds, which are causing them to rethink the beginnings of Chinese civilization. Ancient Egyptian head cones. Archaeologists have long wondered about coffee cup-sized, cone-shaped hats that people are often seen wearing in ancient Egyptian artwork. Until recently, experts were unsure whether these hats ever actually existed, or if they were symbolic. Finally, in late 2019, researchers uncovered 2 of the headpieces in 3,300-year-old burials at Akhetaten, a unique archaeological site containing the ruins of one of ancient Egypt's most unusual cities. The 3-inch-tall hats, which were cream-colored and seemed to be made of beeswax, were found in the graves of low-ranking laborers, with the cones entangled in their intact hair. So they were definitely real and not just symbolic. Researchers detailed their findings in the journal Antiquity, pointing out that the confirmed physical existence of the cone hats dispels any theories about them being symbolic of status in ancient Egyptian artwork. The artifacts also challenge the theory that the cones were made of a substance that melted in the sun and cleansed the wearer's head and body. Oddly, however, artwork implies that upper-class members of society wore the cones more commonly than low-ranking citizens, yet the hats were found in a worker cemetery. Were the laborers' cones perhaps a way of imitating elite style? That's one possibility. As archaeologists now know, finding evidence of the cone hats was merely the first step in trying to untangle the mysteries surrounding them. Who knew a hat could lead to so many questions? Swimming reindeer. This strange elongated object was actually carved by humans. Around 13,000 years ago, in what is now France, someone carved a sculpture of 2 swimming reindeer out of the tip of a mammoth tusk. It was discovered in 2 pieces in 1866, and a French Catholic priest and archaeologist realized during the early 20th century that the pieces fit together to form the image of 2 reindeer, a larger stag followed by a smaller female, swimming nose to tail. Can you see it? Do you see it? Created during the late Ice Age, a period that eventually became known as the Magdalenian, the sculpture shows that humans, reindeer, and mammoths existed at the same time at some point in history. When the artifact was made, the region experienced a climate much like modern-day Siberia. The 8.7-inch long sculpture's exact purpose or use is unknown. Experts speculate that it may have been a totem of some sort, which represented an individual or group, or it perhaps represented a myth or had an allegorical meaning related to the circle of life and survival. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Ancient rock art figures. Back in 1891, an Australian rancher named Joseph Bradshaw got lost and discovered thousands of dancing red figures painted on the wall of a rock shelter in the country's sparsely populated Kimberley region. The slender figures, called guions, looked like nothing he or anyone else at the time had ever seen before. There are actually thousands of figures with detailed headdresses, tassels, boomerangs, and spears. This style is very different from other cave art found in the area. Archaeologists were mystified, unable to determine who painted the figures, when, or why. That all changed earlier this year, when scientists came up with a very creative way to date the paintings. They were finally able to determine their age based on carbon dating of fossilized wasp nests found along the same rock faces. This helps date the artwork to around 12,000 years ago, give or take 500 years. This is the closest experts have come so far to unraveling the mystery of the figures, since the ochre pigment they were created with is not datable. At the time, the last ice age was rapidly ending, causing sea levels to rise. As a result, the Kimberley region that the Gwion people inhabited shrank by as much as half, displacing populations and forcing people to relocate inland. Researchers believe that the figures depicted in the cave art may reflect the chaos of the changing environment. While the Gwion people remain largely a mystery to experts, the ability to date their artwork partially solves the puzzle, allowing them to focus on answering other questions about the ancient society and the conditions they lived in. Sahara stone structures. In 2018, archaeologists working in the little explored Western Sahara region of Africa revealed the discovery of hundreds of strange stone structures of all shapes and sizes, thought to date back thousands of years. The findings remain unexplained, with experts unsure who built them or why. Some of the structures are circular while others are crescent-shaped, rectangular, or built in straight lines, and the builders also combined these shapes. These people really liked shapes and lines. The researchers believe that some of these formations were used for marking graves, but they don't know what their other purposes were. It's difficult to determine the structure's ages given the lack of surrounding artifacts, although some sites contain human remains dating back roughly 1,500 years. War between Morocco and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, which lasted until 1991, largely prevented scientific digs from happening in the Western Sahara. Since then, archaeologists have just started excavating throughout the region, and fieldwork very rarely occurs due to security concerns. But there are, no doubt, plenty more artifacts waiting to be discovered, which will help reveal the region's untold history. Matani Empire Palace. A drought that plagued Iraq in 2018 caused the waters of the Mosul Dam to recede, revealing the ruins of a 3,400-year-old palace belonging to the Matani Empire, one of the region's least understood ancient civilizations. Archaeologists rushed to retrieve the artifacts from the banks of the Tigris River while they had the chance, adding to the mere handful of evidence of the Matani Empire that has ever been found. As the waters rose, re-submerging the ruins, the team gathered what they could, including 10 cuneiform clay tablets and bright red and blue wall paints. German researchers hope to learn more about the Matani Empire by interpreting the tablets. The society is so little studied, experts have not even identified its capital city, although they do know that it once ruled over parts of Syria and northern Mesopotamia. They also believe the Matani Empire existed between the 16th and 13th centuries BC, during which time it wielded great power over the region, but apparently they have left little behind for us to learn more about them. Church in a fortress. A 2019 study by archaeologists working in Derbent, Russia, a city along the Caspian Sea, asserts the possible presence of one of the world's oldest churches in the northwestern corner of the Narin Kala fortress. The fortification dates back to 300 AD and houses an unidentified, almost completely hidden, cross-shaped structure, which sits 36 feet underground. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that scientists will get to the bottom of the mystery, as the ruins are part of a UNESCO Cultural Heritage Site, meaning excavation is prohibited, so far. This leaves researchers with little to no other options besides speculating on the structure's use based on what little they do know. Besides possibly serving as an early church, the mysterious structure may have been a reservoir or a Zoroastrian fire temple, according to a statement from scientists with the Mises National University of Science and Technology, who examined the site using a new technology called muon radiography. The new findings leave experts in doubt about the structure being intended as a water storage tank, although it may have been repurposed as one during the 17th and 18th centuries. But for now, and perhaps indefinitely, they have no choice but to put forth their best guess about what the building was used for. Pre-Egyptian Neolithic peoples. Before ancient Egypt rose to power as one of history's most iconic empires around 3100 BC, it was preceded by the presence of Neolithic peoples, who occupied the region between 9300 and 4000 BC. In fact, these societies influenced later, more advanced civilizations, yet the question of exactly who they are remains unanswered. This lingering mystery is due in part to scholars' heavy focus on the Neolithic inhabitants' successors, leaving the early residents understudied. But many important sites that could reveal information about these societies are difficult to access due to both their remote locations and the need for the modern government's permission to excavate. Researchers are now turning more attention to these Neolithic peoples, however. A 2018 study of 6 burial sites along an extinct seasonal lake, published in the journal African Archaeological Review, revealed that the region was wetter during the Neolithic period than it is now, although it wasn't exactly lush with vegetation. But this enabled people to live in areas that are now simply unrealistic for human habitation because they're too dry. The archaeologists who conducted the study focused on the final Neolithic years between 4600 and 4000 BC, during which time they erected megaliths, shrines, and calendar circles, and began formally burying their dead in cemeteries. Researchers excavated cemeteries containing around 68 human skeletons and a vast array of artifacts, including pottery, seashells, cosmetic tools for women, stone weapons for men, and stone and ostrich shell jewelry. The people occupying one cemetery lived into their 40s and sometimes even their 50s, vastly outliving most humans of the time. They were also taller than most other people back then, with men measuring around 5.5 feet tall on average, while women were roughly 5.3 feet tall. Yet strangely, the archaeologists found another cemetery showing a much higher childhood mortality, a lower average lifespan, and smaller people. While the two cemeteries could have belonged to different populations, the occupants bear enough similarities for researchers to believe that they were shared between the same group of people. They have yet to account for the differences between the remains from one cemetery to the next, but theorize that class differences may offer a realistic explanation. Perhaps the smaller, shorter-living people were commoners, while the robust, longer-living, and taller individuals were members of the elite. For now, however, experts are a long way from confirming this speculation, and may have many other unanswered questions about the enigmatic people who lived in the region before the famous Egyptians. A lost chamber. In August 2018, archaeologists announced the discovery of a living room-sized stone chamber beneath the Province House in downtown Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada. There is no mention of the underground vault in the historical record, making the find a complete surprise to everyone involved. It was first detected when a backhoe unintentionally hit what seemed like bedrock at first, but the material fell apart suspiciously easily, and upon further examination, the crew discovered the chamber, complete with a semicircular vaulted ceiling. They didn't enter the vault because doing so was deemed unsafe, but they investigated using remotely operated cameras, and archaeologist April McIntyre submitted the findings to the Canadian government, approximating the structure's dimensions as measuring 20 feet by 13 feet and about 10 feet high. Artifacts on the chamber's roof dating back between the late 18th and early 19th centuries provide the closest evidence of the vault's possible age. These items include German pottery dating back to the 17th century, a well, a coal chute, stone walls, storm drains, and drain pipes. McIntyre tried but failed to find any record of the structure existing, leaving her and her colleagues scratching their heads. In her report, she urged the government to investigate further using ground-penetrating radar. Mysterious human relative. Researchers were confused, to say the least, when in 2018 they discovered stone tools in the Philippines that predated the arrival of modern humans by roughly 600,000 years. A study detailing the artifacts, published in the journal Nature, describes how someone used the tools to butcher a rhinoceros before leaving them behind, along with the animal's unused remains. The rhino's bones, which bear cut marks and other evidence of deliberate mutilation, are between 631,000 and 777,000 years old, meaning whoever crafted and used the tools was not a member of the Homo sapiens species. In other words, they were not a modern human, but an unidentified ancient ancestor who occupied the Philippines long before we did. The discovery upends previously held notions that early hominins could not access Pacific islands that were separated by land from vast swaths of ocean. After all, researchers assumed there was no way these species knew how to sail. Or did they? Evidence now points to the contrary of these long-assumed beliefs, suggesting that early hominins indeed made deep-sea crossings. So, who made the tools? Nobody knows. The crafters may have been Denisovans, a ghost lineage of hominins that interbred with Homo sapiens at one point. But the most likely candidate, according to experts, is Homo erectus, which they know for sure entered Southeast Asia at least 700,000 years ago, as evidenced by fossils discovered in Java, Indonesia. The hominins that lived in the Philippines may have been Homo erectus descendants with a condition called island dwarfism, which results when a species evolves to live optimally in a predator-free environment, causing them to shrink. How they crossed the ocean is a complicated question that researchers admittedly don't know the answer to, but they speculate that the population made its way to the Philippines by way of Borneo and Palawan to the west, or from China and Taiwan to the north. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and while you're at it, leave any suggestions you have for what you'd like to see in future videos in the comments below. See you soon! Bye!